I've been a fan of your music for a long time, man, and it's also really fun for me. I don't think I've ever recorded one of these in this weird time between Christmas and New Year's. Like, I don't know if you relate to this, but it sort of feels like it's like we're playing hooky or something. It's like everybody else is off, doing nothing, and we're just sneaking in a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like mandatory vacation time. I feel like all the like agents and managers and like business people are actually, this is, especially in the US, the 1 week where they will actually use out of office emails and stuff.
Have you been pretty busy? Because obviously, I mean, DJs, we're doing shows and that sort of thing. How are you with like holiday mode?
Yeah, I like had a gig last weekend in New York, and I'm going back to New York this week, like day after tomorrow, for December 30th, so not New Year's Eve. But I have January off, so this is like the last gig of the year, and I have like a real break, so I'm excited.
But yeah, man, I mean, this year for you, I have to assume probably busiest year as a DJ you've had.
Definitely. Yeah, it was the most busy year of my life, I think.
How was that? What was that like?
I mean, it was pretty surreal. Like, I guess the first year right after the pandemic, right when shows got started, was really also my first year of gigging super hard, like outside of local stuff and all of that. And this year was when it really ramped up to where like I had very few weekends off and was mostly just like living in planes and stuff and doing the thing that DJs always like discuss on Twitter or whatever, where they, they're complaining about flights and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's such a specific, it's like all we do, it's yeah, the complaining about flights thing. It's like, it's corny, but at the same time, I kind of love it because it's so universal. It's like a weird shared language almost.
Yeah. I mean, even if you have like nothing musically in common with like another artist or something, that's like the thing you will probably bond with them over is like,
dude,
the act of getting on a plane and not sleeping and all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's so funny, man. Yeah, I've told this story like 8 million times on this podcast, but for me, that was, I had a international flight, and I just happened to be sitting next to Paul Oakenfold for no reason. And I didn't know him, and we didn't really talk much. But the only conversation we had was at the very end of the flight, where I was just like, "Hey, man, you're Paul Oakenfold. I'm also a DJ." And he, you could tell he didn't really want to be bothered, but it was my first time going to Australia. And so I was like, I was just excited. So I was like a little bubbly, and I was like, hey man, this is crazy, but you're a historic DJ, and this is my first time doing this. And then he just started giving me like flight routing advice. He was like, first of all, the flight you're doing right now, this routing is terrible. He was like, that was the whole interaction, but it's exactly what we're talking about. It's like, I'd have nothing else to say to him,
Yeah, but that's like good, like dad DJ advice, telling you the right routing. I mean,
yeah, no, it was great. Yeah, no, it was very dad-like. And then I ended up having him on this podcast later, like a year or two later, and I brought up that interaction. He did not remember it at all. It was like, it was great. Have you had, I mean, on that note, I'm all over the place, and I promise I have lots of notes. I'll keep us on track, but I'm just curious, have you had that moment with anyone you looked up to, any big names who just randomly all of a sudden you're in the same room with them and there's an interaction?
Yeah, I mean, one very like specific like airport interaction, or specifically similar one, was meeting I don't know why his name just escaped me, and it's because I just thought about it, but it's like the UK garage legend guy. He had Guide My Soul and like Todd Edwards. Yeah, Todd.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I saw Todd Edwards in an airport, and I was like, "Oh, yo, are you Todd Edwards?" And I started talking to him, and he's actually told me about Ableton Note. He started telling me he was like, "You need to get Ableton Note so you can make music on the plane." And he apparently made a bunch of remixes, and actual tracks, almost totally in Ableton Note. But that was the advice I got from him while.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Did you take it? Do you use it?
Yeah, I got it before the plane took off. I managed to download it and I started making stuff in it. This was probably 3 weeks ago or something. It was maybe more, but it was very recently. So I haven't made that much on it. It's kind of hard for me to actually make music while traveling.
It was something I was going to ask you in general, because I was going through your whole discography earlier today, and I knew this, but it sort of crystallized for me when I was going through all your tunes. It's just, you put out a lot of music in a short period of time. At least you have historically. And I wanted to ask you, as life gets busier and you're on the road more and all that, how difficult is that adjustment? Because I have to imagine for a while, it's mostly you sitting in a room making music with the occasional gig. And at a certain point, that balance kind of starts to tip over.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, the first couple of years of releasing music, it was almost I was at home all the time, and I had just built up a massive stack of tracks, because almost all my spare time I just spend at home in the studio making tracks. And this year I made very little, but I guess I compensated a little for it by, when I'm on tour, a lot of times I'll stay with other artists and we will make music together. So there has been a lot more of that, where if I'm in London, I stay with this guy, DJ ADHD, and we always make music, and Chloe Robinson. And then I'll stay with Tice. I've stayed with Addison Groove, and we made some music. And there's some other people, but yeah.
Does it feel because I've had that experience, and for me, what's really nice about that kind of thing is when you really feel like you found another one of you, you know what I mean? Where it's you're saying that, all my spare time I sit and I make tracks. And I think for at least some of the people you just named, I know Tice particularly, he's always making something. And it must be nice to sort of go somewhere foreign or somewhere unfamiliar and, just have a kindred spirit there waiting.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the first things that struck me when I started touring, was that all of the artists that I like are basically just like me in a lot of ways, where we in your hometown, even with other local artists, if you are someone who is kind of obsessed with this in maybe an unhealthy way, you can't, or at least I have trouble doing other stuff. This was almost a vice. It's like playing video games or something.
Right.
And those other people are kind of just like that, where they have this kind of unhealthy obsession with music that you relate to in a lot of ways, because it feels like you're meeting someone who you've known forever almost.
Well, and it's so interesting to me that you said you kind of had this moment where you realized a lot of the artists you liked, the music that you liked, ended up being made by people whose personalities you connected with. That's a very interesting idea, because I have to assume we're talking about different genres of music, different styles of music, all kind of held together by the fact that it ended up that, these are all people I would actually hang out with. I wonder if I don't know, it's sort of a woo-woo idea, but I wonder if there's anything behind that.
I mean, I think there is. I think like the way like music is partially like a mathematical thing or whatever, but a lot of it has to do with like memory associations and things that like are, different sounds have different like almost etymologies that are, it's like a language. So if you have the same kind of common background, it probably means you grew up listening to a very similar type of music or had, and the type of music you listen to as a kid is definitely associated with your personality and with your, like, if you were an emo or something, that's a specific type of childhood, and you consumed specific stuff for specific reasons, for like even down to how you were treated or whether you were bullied or not, or whether you played video games and what video games you played and all of that stuff. It's all related, I think.
Well, okay, so I got to ask, as long as we're on that topic, I mean, which of those childhood categories do you fall into? Like, what were you listening to? Were you claiming any kind of scene, or was there a scene you wanted to be a part of?
I think like, there was like the being like kind of always on the internet thing when I was a kid. And watching Flash videos, like I feel like I watched the same like stupid Flash videos as a lot of the artists that
are we talking like Newgrounds era?
Yeah, like Salad Fingers and like that kind of stuff. I mean, I think like a lot of people probably found Aphex Twin and Boards of Canada through those videos. And then like, listening to drum and bass as a middle schooler or high schooler, like that kind of stuff. I wasn't an emo, but I had friends who were, maybe being bullied. I don't know. That probably happened.
You've repressed the bullying memories. Well, I mean, what kind of was it Knoxville where you grew up? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, Knoxville is a town that, I mean, I've been to play shows. I think that's the only times I've ever been there is to play shows. And I generally have good memories of like fun times, and I thought it was a cool town, but I've just done one-nighters there. What kind of a place was it to grow up in?
It's like for being in Tennessee and East Tennessee, it's maybe a little more. I mean, it's like more of the generic American strip mall culture that like you get in every city where like, there was a shopping mall and, everyone kind of like, I don't have a Southern accent. None of my friends really had Southern accents until they became adults, right? Because we all kind of learned to talk from the television. The music scene was more like but when I was a kid, it was really before EDM was a thing. So the music scene in Knoxville was really like indie rock focused. And that was like a big part of like my background in music, and I was like in indie rock bands and stuff, and other types of bands. Yeah.
And you were playing drums, is that right?
Yeah. I did play like guitar a little bit and sang a little. I did kind of everything, but drums was my main instrument. Yeah.
It's interesting. Some people, man, when you find out they played certain instruments, it's surprising or unexpected. And then for you, when I hear you played the drums and then I listen to the music you make today, I'm like, oh, of course, it makes a lot of sense. Like, do you consciously, do you think that the drumming background is in, like, do you use it in the way you make music now?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think, especially like when I was, especially like for the like really breakbeat oriented stuff, like the way like you program ghost notes and the way you program a snare drum and doing like multiple different hits or trying to make the hi-hat sound more realistic, or more like played. Yeah, that's like definitely. I wouldn't sound the same if I didn't play drums, for sure.
Yeah. One thing I noticed, and maybe it's just because what's the name? Oh yeah, I was listening to Dump Truck earlier, which, you know, is a very rhythmic track. And one thing that stood out to me about that song in particular was it was almost like the rhythm of it was the lead. You know what I mean? Like it was almost like instead of a melody being, you know, the hook, or instead of even a noise being the hook, it was almost like it was actually the rhythm is the hook of the song. I don't know if that connects with you, but that is kind of how it hit me. And it was like, it's very interesting because not a lot of dance music does that, at least in this arena these days.
Yeah, that's probably true. I hadn't thought about that either, but like I think that probably is true for a lot of my songs where the rhythm is the beginning, is like, even when I make melodies or make like synth parts, they're usually programmed like in between the drums, or to sound like they're coming out of the drums, as opposed to like the drums supporting the melody or being the accompaniment or whatever. The drums are usually, I mean, like, it's like, I feel like I was listening to some like rock mix engineer, or maybe talking to someone, I don't know, but they referred to like drums forward mixing versus drums behind mixing. And some music is mixed with, a lot of like older rock music is mixed with the drums at the back and like the guitars and the vocals at the front. But like a lot of other like drum and bass, especially the more like the like jungle side of things, is like drums at the front and everything else at the back. It was Gove from Ivy Lab who was like talking to me about that.
Okay.
That was what it was. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it is crazy when you go back and listen to older eras of recorded music and realize how different things were. You know, I used to be and have been turning back into a big metalhead. And you go back and you listen to some of the old, like, you know, like 80s metal recordings, and it's crazy how buried the drums are often. I mean, the whole thing is muddy, but it's like for such a technically complex form, and especially the drummers who are like back there losing their minds. It's wild. Yeah. You can barely hear them on some of those recordings. It's so crazy.
Yeah. I mean, they would even put like a lot of old thrash metal, they would put like reverb on the snares.
Totally.
Which doesn't make any sense. Like, because that's in a club, like, or in a concert or wherever you would see these metal bands, that's not how it would sound. It sounds way more aggressive. But I think like I think like Rick Rubin kind of changed that. That like metal can, like the metal recordings can be kind of separated between like, what was the one Slayer album that he produced?
Was it Rain and Blood, or was it after that? I think
it was Rain and Blood. Like Rain and Blood was like sounded way different to the previous thrash metal albums because the drums are dry and like the so you can hear everything and it's just in your face. There's no like reverb on the there is some reverb on the vocals, but it's like it's much more dry, like compressed forward mix than like the older like Metallica records or any of the other like thrash metal records, which are like instrumentally probably pretty similar to the Slayer one, but like they don't sound the same at all.
Man, well, where are you at because I think you're kind of on a nerdy level. Like I think your engineering as well as the way you write music, but I think your engineering plays a part in your sort of signature sound, if that is a thing. And I'm curious, as long as we're on the topic for you, how do you feel about your engineering and like, what's the journey there? Because I was just listening to some newer stuff versus some older stuff, and you can hear that you're trying different techniques and different tracks sound mixed differently, but they all have a pretty cohesive level of quality. I mean, they're all banging. And so Yeah, I don't know. Are you on a journey? Have you arrived?
I feel like I'm definitely like always trying new things. But like I am like I don't know how to mix in the box very well. That's something that like I think people, especially in like the EDM world and in just actually in the whole modern dance music world, most people will mix in the computer. But the people I like learned from when I started like making like techno for dance floors kind of, or dance music, for DJing, those people all were really into hardware and into like running everything through like a Mackie mixer and mixing, or like mixing to tape and that kind of stuff to make everything crusty sounding.
Who were those people? Who'd you learn from?
There was this guy in Knoxville called Alex Falk, who used to be like a psytrance DJ, and then he started making techno, and like he is like kind of like almost like a career raver in the Southeast, and he has a sound system and runs sound for like a lot of underground parties kind of all around the Southeast. Yeah, just showed he's really into modular synth. I feel like he could have become a lot more famous if he wanted to, but he like has no desire. He just likes like throwing little parties in Tennessee and North Carolina and stuff. And
so respectable, man. Because I think every city has at least one of those people who's just kind of like a pillar of the scene, but isn't really in it to. Because I don't know, there's such a like the American capitalist mindset of like everything has to be growing and getting bigger all the time. And you always have to be looking for the next rung on the ladder and trying to up your game and your status. It's like, and of course, some of that is very valid because we all got to, live our lives and eat and all that. But it is respectable to me. And I like every time I meet one of those people who is just kind of on a different wave with it. And it's like, well, no, that's not what I'm doing here,
Yeah. Like he also like, he kind of had this way of, or still has like an ethos with how he does things. And even though like I was throwing parties with him and our parties were free. And it was like on purpose. We never wanted to charge money. And like partially also because we were doing like techno in a city that was like kind of no one would probably pay to see techno in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Right.
At the time. They would rather go see like EDM stuff. And
what era is this approximately?
This was like, I kind of joined that crew in like 2013 or 2012.
Got it.
And yeah, they would book kind of like Midwestern techno DJs and other kind of regional techno and EBM artists.
That sounds fun, man. I mean, I was going to ask you earlier, growing up in Knoxville, being interested in, say, drum and bass or Aphex Twin, how common of an interest was that? Like, was this just you in your room and nobody else talked about it? Or did you have a little group of people who were also interested in the same thing?
I don't think any of my friends liked it. I think I would try to show them like the stuff that I liked, like this AFX track is really cool, you should listen. And they would say it like makes them uncomfortable. A lot of my friends were also really into jam bands. And there was this band called STS9 or Soundtribes 9 that like kind of got a lot of those people into electronic music. So by that time they would be like, I remember convincing a bunch of them to go see Diesel Boy with me. And like they were all converted right after that. It was sick. It was a really gratifying experience. Yeah.
Well, that's a good one. I mean, Diesel Boy is such a sick DJ that I feel like he's pretty undeniable when you see him live.
Yeah, and he's cool because he's like one of the only, like, especially at that time, he was the only DJ who really toured like kind of at venues and like kind of more accessible settings in the Southeast. It felt like I don't remember like seeing other DJs really doing what like Planet of the Drums was doing, which was like just giving you a DJ experience as a concert, you know.
That's a good point, man. Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that, but they were very early to that concept. It's probably, I had Diesel Boy on here a while back, and he's a really interesting dude. But one of the things he was talking about for a while, with Planet of the Drums and all that was, they were such an anomaly in the States. I mean, the U.S. drum and bass community in the early to mid 2000s was very small world. And so I'm sure it was sort of taking influence from all the bigger shows they were seeing in the UK and how somebody like Pendulum is turning into rock stars over there and wanting some of that over here. But it's so funny that it sort of gets reflected and reinterpreted over and over until it gets to you in Knoxville as kind of just like a plucky drum and bass show that you're convincing your friends to go to. Like I don't know, it's kind of romantic for me to think about it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is. I mean, it was that for probably a lot of people, though. I mean, I imagine Diesel Boy was like the first DJ a lot of people ever saw at that time.
Yeah, for drum and bass, for sure. He was synonymous. And I think I don't think I'm mistaken. I think he was sort of one of the first, if not the first, like US drum and bass DJ that really broke into the UK at the time, because it was at least my understanding is the UK drum and bass scene was like the most gatekeeping exclusive scene of all time. Very, would look down their nose at anyone not coming in a way that they thought was proper, which kind of meant you had to be British. And I think Diesel Boy was like one of the very first that, again, was just so undeniably good that after a while they were like, I guess we gotta let him in.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I feel like I've even heard interviews with him saying that like the first times he played in the UK they weren't that nice to him. Like there were people there who were nice to him, but I feel like I've even heard this same story from like the guy from Ash from Evil Intent. He told me like, I think they played at maybe Fabric or something like that. And it was a little rough because like and I think it's still this way with UK drum and bass. Like the way British people listen to drum and bass is not the same as the way Americans listen to it or the way Dutch people listen to it. It's like, it's like, it's a different genre. It has different like associations. It's more clubby and like sexy there. I mean, maybe not sexy, but it's like, it's the music that kind of bros listen to almost in the UK.
Totally. Well, and it's so much more mainstream. It's on the radio there that like they've had #1 pop hits that are drum and bass. Yeah. It's just so many more things over there. Whereas here it's still, even though, certainly drum and bass estates had a good year in 2023. I mean, it's nothing like what it is in the UK,
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I think like now, like dads are listening, like just reminiscing about seeing DJ Hype at Fabric or whatever when they were like 19, and it was just like another night like at a club for them. But like, and they're not like music nerds or anything or into it. They're just like, they went clubbing because they were kids. That's like as far as it goes for a lot of people there.
It's actually interesting. I should add, I know a few people I should ask, but I wonder what the sort of UK drum and bass luminaries think when they see a bunch of Americans in 2023 getting excited about drum and bass in sort of that cute, like, discovering it for the first time. And everyone's like, hey, have you heard about this drum and bass? Which I think a lot of people have had that moment last year.
Yeah.
I wonder what they think. It's got to It's got to be, I guess, equal parts cute and frustrating.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, okay, to bring it back to you and Knoxville and growing up and you discovering this music, I guess what I'm trying to zero in on is like how much of an anomaly were you there at this time being into this music? I mean, I've seen you in other interviews say that you were kind of a loner kid in general, spending time in your room, watching Flash videos, making music, all that sort of thing. I mean, did it feel lonely? Like, was music a thing that, you know, you could go to when the rest of the world didn't seem as welcoming? Or was it more kind of,
Definitely. That was a big part of it. It was like, I was always like, I kind of defined my whole life around the music I listened to as like, ever since I could remember. Like that was like always, even when I was like 8, I would, if I had an opportunity to discuss something in class, it would be like what my favorite bands were.
Yeah.
And so like, as I got older, like I did join bands and I played a lot of music and stuff. So I did have friends, but I got grounded a lot too. So like I would always have to leave the bands because I got grounded. And so then I would be at home, like finding other ways to make music.
What were you getting grounded for?
Like I was not a very well-behaved kid. I mean, like, I don't know, like smoking weed or like whatever, all kinds of stuff.
The classics. You were doing the hits.
Yeah. All the classics. Yeah.
Were there a lot of Indian people in Knoxville?
There was like a decent amount. There was a community because it's a university town and there's like a national lab there. So there's a lot of like scientists and where, a lot of scientists and engineers in the US are from India. So there was a community. It wasn't like a huge part of my life. I mean, it was like that community was very like, not insular, but it was a little bit isolated in the sense of, they have their own social functions, and our family went there. But like, because I was like kind of a terrible kid, like if you behaved badly, like you got kind of, I don't know, like not like ostracized, but all the parents would talk about you, all the adults would talk about you and not really want their kids around you and stuff. So that was me. And so I'm not that connected to them anymore, I guess.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I mean, was the reason your family was there? Were your parents scientists?
Yeah, they were. Yeah. They worked at the national lab there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting too. And the only reason I asked was, I feel like we're talking about these ideas of identity and how you define yourself. And as a kid, trying to figure out what your identity is and how you want to be perceived and all that. And I think some people grow up and it's sort of just obvious, it's like whatever community they're in is just, that's sort of what they claim, and there's a path to follow. And then I think for other people, the path to sort of self-actualization and figuring out who you are is a lot muddier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes I think music really can. It was not at all the same situation for me, but when you were talking about defining yourself through music, I related to that very strong. I did that a lot when I was a kid, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a thing where like you don't really know who you are, but like, I don't know if music feels like the coolest thing in the world, or it felt like that to me when I was a kid, and it still does, but like it felt like, if I don't have an identity, but like, I found it in that. And I think everyone who does this professionally probably had that, because it's like you get so obsessed with it. It kind of takes over everything else. And yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I was talking to, I don't know if you know, there's this British, she's a singer, songwriter, and just she put out a EP on UKF. Her name is Catching Cairo, and she does these kind of like breezy drum and bass to it. She's super dope. But she was talking about this idea, and she was saying that as a kid, whenever she was sort of singing or performing or just listening to drum and bass, other music she connected with, was when, as a kid, she felt the most powerful. And for some reason, I don't know why, but I think about that all the time now. And I think there's something to it because as a kid, that's another thing that you don't have any power, you don't have any control. And at least for me, I think music, the more I think about it, was like, yeah, I felt powerful, and it felt like the most authentic version of me. You know, I was like, oh, all the other stuff I was doing before was like aspects of me, but this I think is like actually the inside me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I don't know, like I remember driving to school and like blasting Diesel Boy mixes out of my car windows and just feeling like a god, like just, you know, driving in and having everyone subjecting like the whole parking lot or whatever to this music that maybe they were just annoyed by, but to me, I did feel powerful. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. Cause I mean, even that driving around blasting the Diesel Boy mix, there's a power in that too, where in your everyday life, it's not like you're walking around shouting at people, but then there's a part of you that like, that is fun to do, and it does feel good every once in a while, you know? Yeah. and you get it out by blasting the music. I don't know. I love that, man. That's a great image. Have you ever talked to Diesel Boy, like now that you have this career and you're doing this? Do you know him?
No, I don't know him. One time I met him at like a festival where I was playing on the same stage as him. And like, he was like my hero at that age. And so when I was a kid, and so when I talked to him then, I couldn't really compose myself that well. It doesn't happen with most artists, but with Diesel Boy, I think he thought I was like on drugs or something. I was dead sober. I was just like really excited and like almost crying, because I think I did cry while he was playing, because it was I was like playing on this same stage as this guy who like I idolized as a kid. And so it felt like a big moment for me.
Yeah. No, he's great. He probably didn't help you out because he's not the most outwardly like warm guy, but he's a super nice dude, man. He's really, if you ever want to have a chat with him, I'd love to link you guys up because he's a great dude.
Oh, amazing. Yeah,
man. So, I mean, going like further out from Knoxville, I mean, you're playing drums, you're making music in your room, you start throwing parties, eventually find a like-minded crew. Is there like a single moment or a few moments where something changed and it got more serious or went to a different level in your mind? Or is your musical path sort of more of a gradual one to get where we are now?
I mean, I think like there were a couple of like big moments. Like one of them was when I started DJing. So like before I DJ'd, I would make music, like electronic music, and just not show anyone, or just show my friends who didn't like electronic music. And I even went to raves and stuff and went to go like see DJs I liked. But it always seemed like a very far away like thing that like, those people are cool and probably from big cities. And I am just a fan who likes this music. And when I got involved with that crew in Tennessee, they were called Technox. I was going to all the parties and clearly like obsessed with the music and the same stuff they were into. So one of them was like, why don't you start DJing? And I was like, okay, yeah, why don't I start doing this? I don't know why. And as soon as that happened, it changed the way I produced, because I was started to like make music for DJing. And then I had this, and I saw that these guys like Alex Falk in particular, and a few other like regional artists, they were getting like their tracks in mixes by big DJs. Like Alex was in like Pangea's Fabric Live mix, and other, like, you would see track lists from like Ben Clock or Marcel Detman or other like big techno DJs who I liked at the time, with these guys from Tennessee's tracks in it. So it was like, oh, you can do that. You can make a track and have it go like out into the world and be a real thing, and not just this thing that sits on your hard drive and your friends think is like almost like the real thing.
Right.
And so I was like, I want to do this too. I want to track on vinyl. That was the whole goal, is to just have, release a vinyl record with my name on it and have it like end up in a dollar bin somewhere. And, later on, I think like maybe around 2018, that happened, and like more labels started wanting to release my music. And then I think like Fortet at one point playlisted one of my tracks. And then I was like, it kind of dawned on me that maybe it could be more than just me releasing records and having a regular job and throwing parties, but like it could be more than me being like a local DJ who does it for fun. And then I kind of started pushing a little harder.
What were you doing to make money at the time? Like, what was the day job situation?
It was like an office job. I think at one point it was engineering, but it was like sciencey stuff. And it was like typical 9 to 5 kind of vibe, where I would work, regular hours. And then after work, like basically after work every day, I would come home and make music until I fell asleep.
Right.
And kind of like the parties that we threw, a kind of a monthly party, kind of punctuated everything. So everything was kind of, I lived for those, like that one day every month we would have our party.
I mean, there's an innocence to that kind of situation you're describing in a way. Like, do you relate to, because I think about those times in my own life when it was this just pure passion without too much expectation on it. And it was this release that I could go to after, doing sort of the quote unquote real life responsibilities and all of that. And it's weird because I certainly would not want to go back to that. But at the same time, it was some of the best times I've ever had, Yeah,
no, that's true. I mean, because it was like, those parties were like some of the best times of my life. Especially like that feeling of throwing a party and having, a full dance floor with like the coolest, weirdest music you've ever heard that like no one in the room really maybe even gets.
Right.
And like, it feels like you're doing something. I mean, you are doing something that's like maybe the truest expression of dance music, like maybe because it's not commercial, and that makes it even more pure and for its own thing. Like it wasn't commercial, and there was not the slightest hope that it would, like, anyone would discover it. It was just that, how can we make the party better, and making it as good as possible and the music as good as possible.
Yeah, you're right. You just nailed it. It's the most pure form of it. That's why it's so impactful. That's, I think, 100% the answer. And it makes me want to ask you, at this point, like we started off this conversation talking about how it's getting busier and busier for you, and a bit more, quote unquote serious as far as the work involved. And I think about, like, you put out this EP with Hudson Mohawke, and you've got Set the Roof on there, which huge track for the year. And I think, I'm sure you had some interesting experiences of having like a if you want to call it a hit record, going back to make more stuff after that and having this experience where all of a sudden there is a commercial aspect to some extent. People are paying attention, they're perceiving what you're doing, they're maybe starting to put you in a mental category in their head. Does any of that affect the way you're making music? Is it something you try to keep out of your head? Like, what's the experience of, actually breaking in?
I feel like I haven't fully even processed it in terms of, I guess there is a thing where like, I'm really sensitive to anyone like saying my music. I think a lot of artists must be this way, like, and you're probably this way too, when you read a journalist or something say, like, discuss your music as being within a certain category, and a part of your mind is like, absolutely not. I'm so much more than that. I'm a fully developed art. I can do everything. So like that is a thing where like I want to see like how much further away from a definition or whatever it is that I can take it. And it might be that I will do that, and in my head that will be what I'm doing, and I make a record that sounds like just like the other ones I made, but I thought it was really different, and that's okay. But like I think I imagine that's what everyone goes through with this, like trying to avoid being in a box or whatever.
It's a weird thing where I think a lot of creative work is like this, where you kind of have to exist in two states at the same time, because a thing we learn over and over and over is that you can't control how somebody is going to receive your work. Like once it's out there, people are just going to interpret it however they want, through their own lens, their own life experiences. And that's just what it'll be to them. It doesn't matter what you think it is or what you say it is. So they're like, and that's just a fact. And you can kind of embrace that, and it can be freeing or it can be frustrating. But then at the same time, you have to still have the plot solidified in your own mind of who you think you are and where you're headed and what you want people to, get out of it. And the two narratives don't always match up, but you kind of have to like live in both of them, if that makes sense. Yeah,
I think you do. I mean, especially I think now I've hit this point where like my agent and manager are kind of like telling me, for good reason, that I need to maybe tighten up like marketing kind of stuff and like defining like what it is I am doing. In my mind, like it's just I'm DJing and making dance music, and that's as far as it goes. But like if you want to be, sellable to bookers or talent buyers or whatever, you have to have like a unique selling point or some kind of thing that makes you, and why do they want you on their stage and all of that stuff, or their label. And yeah, I think I have to figure out that stuff maybe a little more now, because it does matter from like an economic sense. If I want to keep doing this as a job, I probably have to like tighten all of that up and not be so random about it. At least with respect to PR and having artwork that makes sense and matches,
Yeah. I mean, is that challenge, does that sound fun to you? Does that sound annoying to you? How do you look at doing that kind of work?
It's at first it was annoying, but I think it can be made fun. Like, I think a lot of artists do a really great job of building a world around what they do and having it all kind of be like a unified thing that is there. When you listen to their music, you're in their universe. I don't know if I have that. I think like I just make tracks and in hopes that they work for DJs, but like it could be fun, like to build something that is like more coherent, or it's a lot more ambitious, I think, than just like making jams.
Yeah. And now that you're talking about it, I wonder if this connects back a little bit to the ideas of identity we were talking about earlier, where it's sort of, you've been expressing your identity through your music. And at least, I won't speak for you, but in my head, it's like, oh yeah, if you listen to, say these 10 DJ mixes I made, like you'll kind of get who I am, and you'll kind of have an understanding of like how my head works. And it's fun to think about trying to apply that to other concepts, right? Like, how can I show you who I am through, say, the cohesion of this artwork, or, whatever it is, the presentation of this video, whatever kind of thing you're doing. That's kind of a fun way to look at it, actually.
Yeah, I think it is. And it basically requires you to be like kind of a designer and like a visual artist and other stuff than just a musician, or work with a really tight team that gets you and is able to do that. I think. I assume. I don't have any experience, so I'm just making it up as I go. Yeah.
Hey, I mean, that's what everybody's doing, man. That's, I think the longer you do this kind of work, it's like you realize even at the high levels, they don't have any clue. Yeah. Nobody has any idea. It's all just kind of based on what seems cool at the time.
Yeah. That's actually reassuring. Yeah. That's how I will base it on, I'm sure.
Yeah. You got it, man. That's all it can be. I think you try to plan it out too much, and it just loses all of that purity that we were talking about earlier, that sort of creative spark. It's like it's so easy. And I'm sure you know this with music too. It's like, you can think an idea to death so fast. Yeah.
I mean, when you make, like, whenever I set out to make a certain thing, like if I say I want to make like a melodic UK garage track, that's not what comes out. It always comes out to be something not what I intended at all. Like it'll be a different genre or whatever it is. If you do force it, like the results are never good. The results are always, you can hear that you tried to jam it into a pocket that it didn't want to be in.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. Are you the same with production that way? Make something fast, get it out?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Like usually I finish a track within a day or two. I cannot make myself work on anything longer than that. And usually it will get ruined if I do. So even down to like a lot of times when labels ask for changes, I just tell them no, pick a different track.
Yeah, that's a weird one too. Asking for change. We don't have to go too deep into all the politics of that, but it is a very weird thing because getting feedback from somebody is one thing. But actually, somebody you're working with telling you to change it, that can be tough, man. That's another case of sort of their idea of what you do and your idea of what you do. And is there any kind of intersection,
Yeah. I mean, I think also like, at least if I was making a track for somebody else and they asked for changes, I'm all for it. It's their track. So that's fine. But if it's like, mine, like I think what I make is almost like a snapshot of the moment that I was making it, and so nothing I do afterwards will really like necessarily make sense. With if I do change it, it'll just make the track a little less coherent than it was when I made it.
Yeah, 100%, man. It's like I don't know if this is a thing in Atlanta, but I'm sure it is somewhere. It's like when somebody puts an addition on top of their house and stylistically it's like has nothing to do with the rest of the building. is just a monstrosity. It's exactly that. I'm thinking about that. I'm in DC and that's happening all over. And it's just all these like old historic row homes with like just a goofy, ugly fourth story now.
Oh God.
Like different color, different materials. It's exactly that.
Yeah. Because they don't want to destroy the old thing, but they want it to perform a new function, basically, and that's not the function it was intended for, really.
Oh, dude, that's perfect. Yeah. Well, okay. I don't want to keep you here all day, so let me just real quick make sure I ask a couple questions I wanted to ask you. We mentioned the Set the Roof with Hudson Mohawke. I wanted to ask you just in general, the experience of working with him. How did you meet him? What was it like? Was it one of those cases of finding another kindred spirit that we were talking about? Because it's just a very interesting link up for two very unique sounds. And it worked so well. I feel like worth talking about how it happened.
Yeah. I've been a fan of his music for a long time. I mean, since 2010 or 2011 or something, kind of when Satin Panthers came out. I think that was when I first heard him. And I don't know how long ago it was, but at some point he sent me a DM on Instagram and was like, "Oh, I like your music. And if you're ever in LA, let's hang out and maybe like get in the studio." So I just booked a flight to LA as soon as I had free time, because I was not going to miss that. When I got there, we got along pretty instantly. Like, we started talking about like happy hardcore and like,
dude, yes. I want to talk to him about happy hardcore. I've tried to get him on here before with no success, but I'm a huge happy hardcore guy. And I know he is too. I would love to. That's all I want to do is talk about happy hardcore.
Didn't you I feel like I heard in one of the interviews that you used to be a happy hardcore DJ, or you started out.
I started when I was like 16, 17. I was playing vinyl at the time. And for like the first couple of years of my DJ life, it was all happy hardcore. That was like my first love.
Amazing.
Yeah. I still love it, but it was a different time.
Yeah. I mean, it's great music. Like, it's like, I never DJ'd it, but I had like a phase of listening. Like, I think like around, did you ever do you know about Ishkur's Guide?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I think when I found that, like I went through the whole thing and picked out like a few different genres that I really liked, and happy hardcore was one of the ones I went deeper into, and
nice.
Bought a bunch of like music off Beatport at that time.
Awesome.
And
and for anybody listening who doesn't know, Ishkur's Guide is sort of an early internet relic that was kind of just. It's kind of just a genre web that you could, click into and kind of go down rabbit holes of like, this genre is related to this genre. It's like a very early, almost recommendation system in a weird way.
It was so cynical though. Like,
yes.
He insulted like every genre. Like, he didn't say anything nice about any of them.
That's also true. Yeah, good point. Yeah, which is another early internet thing that I think is like even the useful resources were snarky back then.
Yeah.
But sorry, I interrupted you because I got excited. But you said you were talking to him about happy hardcore and other kind of just shared interests.
Yeah, and like old techno and stuff. And and as soon as we I think the first track we made was Wait a Minute, which is on that EP, and maybe one other track, and then that session ended. I was only there for a couple of days, and then I came back to LA a few months later, and then we finished the EP. So it was just like 2 studio sessions, really fast. He's like so easy to work with, and also like has really brilliant taste. Like, yeah, I don't know. He's an amazing producer.
I was wondering sort of what the vibe was with you two in the studio, because I think you both have such distinctive perspectives on what you do. Was it, I mean, how was it, actually like writing music with him? Because I assume you both kind of work fast and go with the creative flow. Would that be accurate to say?
Definitely. Yeah. Neither of us are super technical. So like we didn't ever whenever we either of us wants a sound, we just try to find the fastest way to get there and make it sound the right way that it should sound. And for the most part, like he was driving because we used FL. So he uses FL and I use Ableton, and I do not know how to use FL.
Yeah, same.
It's just so different, but I think they're the same basically. But I like tried to put my hand on the mouse and couldn't figure out how to make it do anything. Yeah. So I would just yell at him to like, no, move this thing over here. And then eventually I took my laptop and plugged in the aux out of the laptop into his audio interface. So I made some of the drums that way, like on Ableton, just like recording them directly into his interface and then him putting him in. But yeah, it was super like intuitive. There was no like real fussing over anything. It was like mostly like, oh, if we do this, does it like hit harder or like sound better? It does. Okay, we're doing it. And yeah, it was intuitive. I've had other experiences with other producers where it is less like that and a lot more technical, or a lot more like where one of us feels like the other person is going in the absolute wrong direction, but not wanting to say anything about it. But I don't remember any moments like that with Ross.
I mean, it sounds fun, man, and obviously productive. I think the reaction to that EP has been pretty huge, and obviously overwhelmingly positive. Like with a track like "Set the Roof" that was sort of this hit off of the record. If we go back and sort of dissect it, like, is it weird to you that popped off in a way? Like, did it feel when you made it? Did it feel different? Did you have any different expectations for it, or was there kind of just, some kind of magic in the air for that tune?
I think while we were making it, we were like, oh, this one is hot. Like, this is like, it had that like easy, like swing to it, and like felt accessible. The track started out with like, I brought this mono machine into the studio that I had been playing with, and I had programmed like some patterns. So one of them, the main like melody and drums was like from this mono machine program. And as soon as he heard it, he was like, oh yeah, let's record this one. So we recorded all the parts in, and then he immediately found that Taylor Parks vocal. So Taylor Parks is someone who he works with often, who's like a top liner in LA. Right. She's like really good. She does stuff with like Alicia Keys and all these big singers. So that's like something only Ross can get access to, I guess. Yeah. Those kinds of singers. So that helped too. Like having like a world-class, like actual good singer on the track helps. Like, but I think he kind of knew, like, as soon as we had the hook, or even just like the groove part, he was like, this is going to be the one off the record. This is like the main track.
Oh yeah. So he just kind of had that intuition, which I guess makes sense because he's worked on, very poppy to very underground projects. And yeah, I guess that's kind of a superpower for him too, is just being able to switch on the pop mode for a second and identify, the actual ingredients of a hit.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I have as much of an intuition for that as him. I think that's like, he's had that from day one, being able to like make things that are beautiful to everyone, and that like are weird as hell, but like everyone can kind of feel and relate to.
100%. And that idea, it actually connects perfectly to the sort of last main thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is kind of this idea of the underground versus the mainstream, the commercial versus the real, all of these ideas, because I think you sit at a really interesting intersection. You're like one of the few people I can point to who sort of can exist comfortably in both worlds in this current moment of dance music in 2023, almost 2024. And I don't know. I just wanted to pick your brain about it. I was looking at old interviews of yours, and you had this really interesting quote. And this is probably a few years ago at this point, but it just stuck out to me. You said, and I'm paraphrasing, but you said there's a big rift between the quote unquote real underground and the quote unquote semi-commercial underground. And I'd like to see that rift go away, or I don't know why there is that rift. And that idea to me, I don't know, I got stuck on that idea because I always talk about the difference between sort of like mainstream EDM and like underground dance music, but I never thought about stratifying it even more than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think like I feel like there are almost like three levels of dance music in the US, where there's like is the mainstream stuff, which is like whatever is happening at EDC. I'm honestly not even aware of half of it, but it's like just these massive artists play, who get like $80,000 or some shit for their fee, and it's sick and it's huge. And then there's like people like Eprom and like G Jones who are they're still huge, but it's like not that level. It is like, that was what I was referring to as like semi underground, like this, and like the Def parties in Atlanta is a good example where it's underground, but like still pretty big and not like, it's not the same underground as like people who throw 200-person queer parties in whatever city. And, that it is all very separate, it seems like, and still is for a variety of reasons. I think I felt like, especially at the time, like musically, it didn't necessarily make sense why it was so separate, because like, I remember playing, like I fully missed a lot of the EDM stuff when it happened. Like, I think at that time I was really into techno, and I'd never heard like specifically Eprom and G Jones. They kind of turned me on to like the EDM side of things. And I remember playing them at like a rave, and everyone lost their shit, like in the middle of a bunch of techno tracks, like the rave tape stuff I put on. And it made perfect sense in that, like a grimy, like underground party. And so that made me think like, I missed all of this incredible music because I was so like kind of pretentious about what I liked. And I didn't feel good about that. But then I was also like, probably a lot of the people who are into that music are missing out on like a bunch of really good music. Like none of them know who like Object is or know who Jeff Mills is. And they like are missing it. Like, it's Jeff Mills is sick. And I feel like if a lot of those people heard like the Purpose Maker records, they would think it was really cool. So it was like as simple as that. Like, it seems like it's there. And also the other side of it was like, none of the, like my favorite artists, like got to play like you can't really make a living playing like super underground dance music in the US. You have to go to Europe. And especially like,
right.
I think it's changing. I think like since the pandemic, it's started to change. But like at the time of that interview, more so, and before the pandemic, even more so, like if you are like a underground techno DJ in the US, like you're not going to get more than $500 or something to play a party, and you have to go unless you're in New York or LA, and that's it. Like there was nothing else, and so you have to go to Europe to make a living doing that. And it also meant that a lot of people in the US are missing out on some really amazing music because they will never have parties where those DJs play in their town. But at the same time, like, you know, someone like Eprom or the Glitch Mob or whatever could go to the smallest town in Arkansas and sell out a 1,000-person room.
Yeah. It's it's so fascinating talking about this kind of stuff because I'm the same as you. Like I listened to all of it from, pretty commercial to pretty underground, and I can see the through lines in my head. Like it is all connected and I can see how it's all connected. And so sort of naively to me, I'm like, well, yeah, why can't we just put all this in the same room? It'd be great. It'd be this interesting mix of things that never get mixed. And but then it's like, I do understand too, the cultural concerns, because obviously like, the more mainstream something gets, generally speaking, sort of the more uniqueness is stripped away from it, the more cultural meaning is stripped away from it, the larger, the more mainstream it gets. And obviously, considering the roots of dance music, that is something we have to be careful for, anytime that starts happening in dance music. And it's just weird, man. I mean, I don't know. Where do you sit with this kind of stuff now? Have you figured out anything? Because I think, Eprom G Jones, great examples of people who exist in two worlds and appeal to both. I do think you're in that same position, but there really aren't many, man. And it's one of those things where I don't really know the solution, but I know that the scene would be more fun if we worked on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pandemic helped. Like, it did a lot of horrible things, but like a lot of people found out about a lot of really cool music, like watching Twitch and just being on the internet over that thing. And so like I do now see a lot of like my like peers who are on the underground side getting booked at big not huge festivals, but like, American festivals. Like you'll see maybe someone like Nick Leon or like Innovate, who are from Miami, or like Kush Jones or something like that on like in a big American festival lineup sometimes. And especially like when I first started working with Dirty Bird, like my idea was like, it would be sick if artists like us had like a little place in the festival circuit, like not necessarily the whole thing, not being headliners, but like just had places where we could play our music to other types of audiences and maybe bring just like some cross-pollination, have a place where those people could veer off to another stage and be like, oh, who are these people? I want to go to this other rave that now I realize is happening in my hometown, where they play all this other music. And, and the other way, where like, someone like me, some really pretentious person who only reads Resident Advisor or whatever, would go to like a big festival and realize that they love John Summit or whatever. Like, right. I think both ways are great. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, wait, is this right? Because you just did Holy Ship, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's cruise ship EDM, that's like I feel like one of the more mainstream things you could have done. What was your experience there? Because definitely you're on some mixed bills on a cruise ship like that.
Yeah. I mean, this was Holy Shipwrecked, so it was actually at a resort.
Oh, okay. I got you.
But same vibe, right? Like the same type of lineup. And I was like pretty obviously one of the odd people out. But I did like Hamdi was there. and like Mary Droppins and some other people who I've like played adjacent to, and Justin J. I don't know how well received my music was there. Like it was like it did feel like people didn't necessarily like feel what I was doing the whole time, but
Right.
like it did feel like I got to show certain, like a few people there, like my music in a way they would never have heard it before. And also, I found out a lot of the artists there actually liked my music, which was really surprising. I didn't think most of them would know who I was.
That's the thing, man. That's the thing. Because, yeah, the crowds are one thing, but the artist community, I think you even said this earlier. It's like we're always surprised to find out, who's listening and who's aware. And we all do have this shared language, this shared experience that I think is such a strong connection. It's, I don't know, that's fun to think about. And I would say even with the crowds, man, you never know like who you're turning on to something. Like, maybe some of them are just hearing you for the first time, and so they don't know how to react, but maybe it plants a seed,
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's hopefully what it did. And even, I mean, I felt like I had the same experience playing like some other like festivals last year, like some of the Dirty Bird ones, and like the like some of like bass festivals where like, people who were really into dubstep were hearing grime played in a totally different way with techno records. And so they were like, oh, this is a new thing for me. And them discovering or sending me a message later that they've gotten really into electro or break beats or something that they weren't into before. And that definitely feels good.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. Because I think, for like speaking to, say, a hypothetical, pretentious underground artist who looks down on mainstream EDM, my argument there is like, well, those crowds eventually are going to need somewhere to go musically too, Yeah, like maybe they have their 2 years of listening to nothing but tech house or listening to nothing but metal dubstep, but that maybe that's a lifestyle for them, for a few of them, that they'll just do that forever. But I think most of them, they're going to need somewhere to go, and they're going to, if they stick around, they're going to want to look deeper. And if you're there to welcome them, I think that's sort of the way it should work in an ideal world.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think like looking down on the other types of music, which is something that I've done and still do unconsciously. Like, I
mean, we all have, of course, but
it's not, I don't know if it's like, it makes any sense, like, because when you do like go to these events, you like realize how cool that music is. Like the big like rhythm dubstep and stuff it's like, it's incredibly well engineered. They put so much work into the light shows and into the whole experience of it. It's like, it's definitely an art, and it's like,
yeah,
it doesn't make any sense to think that they're like a bunch of like uneducated idiots or something. And a lot of that thinking is kind of classist in itself, like, which, for a lot of reasons that like too much to explain, but like, yeah, it's not like any less than the underground stuff. It's just different.
Yeah. It's such a weird, I guess it's just a constant sort of drawing and redrawing the line of wanting to protect like a precious commodity, a subculture, a sound, and wanting to keep it, untouched by outside shitty influences versus, you have to let people in to appreciate it and to partake and to learn and all of that. And I guess everybody keeps just redrawing their own lines for comfort. But anyway, I didn't have a point in any of this other than to say that I think it's something you're doing very well, and it's fun to watch, man. Is there anything else? I mean, I feel like I could talk to you forever, man, but like, I guess, I don't know. Let's end like this. I mean, it's almost the new year. When people hear this, it'll be 2024 already. Where are you at? Where's your head at? Are there things you're looking forward to? Are there things, I don't know if you're like a New Year's resolution guy. Is there anything you want to change? Anything you're working on, you're excited about going into the new year?
Right now, I'm honestly really excited about spending a whole month locked in my studio. So hopefully after January, there will be a bunch of like really new, really strange music that I will have completed for the next year. I do have some releases lined up already for next year that I'm excited about, but like, I don't know if I'm allowed to announce them yet. So I won't, but there will be new releases. What else am I excited about? I don't know. Yeah. Like, I guess that's probably it. I don't have any, I'm going to try to be healthier on the road next year, but I don't know how that.
Oh, that's good. That's always good is what I mean. That's always what's your vice on the road? Is it like eating unhealthy? Is it drinking? Is it not sleeping?
I think it's the eating and it's mostly like eating and not sleeping thing is completely unavoidable. That's a part
of course
what we get paid for, I think. But not exercising, I think, is the big thing. Finding a way to exercise on the road. I don't know how people do it.
Dude, it's so tough. I mean, I've still have not figured it out in many, many years of touring. And when I'm home, like I'm like a gym guy. Like I kind of for mental health reasons, like I go all the time. But it's just, I still can't figure out how to do it on the road. It's hard, man. I don't understand either.
I was hoping you would just give me the key, like.
I mean, I think honestly, the key is, if my understanding of it is just like, you kind of have to just go do it. The people I know who are really good at it, it's kind of like, you know, you get into town, you get to the hotel, and it's just immediately you go do it. It's like there's just no thought. You just automatically, that's what you go do next. And maybe you don't like it. Maybe you want to sleep. Maybe your body doesn't feel good, but you just go do it. And it's kind of, you bake it into the routine of it. Yeah. That's my understanding. But, you know, I can't do it. So don't listen to me.
I like that. Okay, that's pretty solid advice, actually. I had not thought about that, of just baking it into the routine, having it at a specific time. Like, you will always have a time when you're checking into a hotel, and you can always drag that amount of time out a little bit. So so that's the time. Yeah.
I think so, man, because otherwise everything else is so unstable and the timelines are never the same. But yeah, I think that's maybe the one protected period, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, shit, man. Good luck with that. And good luck with all of it, man. I love what you're doing, man. It's been so cool to watch, and I'm really happy we got to have this time to talk. Is there anything else on your mind? Anything else you want to get out there?
No, I hope not.
Well, if there is, come back sometime and we'll do it again. But thank you again, man. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it was an honor. Thank you.
That's it. We're done, man. I appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day. Have a good New Year's.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, you too. And like I said, I listen to this podcast semi-regularly. So it was really sick to be on it. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Oh, dude, I'm so grateful to have you. And that means a lot. And I really appreciate that you were listening, man. And it's great to meet you, man. I hope it's not the last time. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah. All right.
Hell yeah. Bye. All right, man. Take care. Have a good one.
You too.